how years of repeated narcissistic abuse rewire your brain. A narcissist doesn't just hurt your feelings and move on. What they do sinks deeper than that. Psychologists explain that over time, narcissistic abuse quietly reshapes the way your brain works. It's not dramatic at first. There's no single moment where you realize something has changed inside me. Instead, it creeps in slowly until one day you notice that the calm, steady version of yourself feels strangely out of reach. Your mind no longer moves toward peace. It moves toward survival. And you don't even realize it's happening while you're in it. Many survivors describe the same unsettling realization. I don't recognize myself anymore. Maybe it happens while you're still with the narcissist, or maybe it hits after you've finally left. A certain tone of voice makes your chest tighten. A look on someone's face sends your heart racing. A simple question feels loaded, dangerous, wrong somehow, and suddenly you're flooded with panic or anger that feels far bigger than the moment deserves. Psychologists are clear about this. This isn't you becoming dramatic or unstable. This is a nervous system that learned over and over that emotional danger could appear without warning. Then there's the memory loss, the mental fog that scares you in quiet moments. You forget conversations you had just yesterday. You walk into a room and stand there, blank, unable to remember what you came for. You feel slow, scattered, exhausted, even on days when you barely did anything. And because narcissistic abuse almost always includes gaslighting, your mind turns against itself. You hear their voice in your head. You're too sensitive. You're imagining things. You're crazy. Psychologists see this pattern constantly. Self-blame becomes automatic, not because it's true, but because it was trained into you. In reality, your brain has been under constant attack, and these symptoms are signs of adaptation, not failure. To understand why this happens, it helps to look at what life with a narcissist actually does to the nervous system. Living in that environment means living in chronic stress, not the kind of stress that comes and goes, but the kind that lingers in the air. Day after day, your body releases cortisol and adrenaline, preparing for the next emotional ambush. You never know what will set them off. Maybe it's a small comment. Maybe it's nothing at all. The unpredictability is the threat. Psychologists call this state hypervigilance, when your brain stays on guard because it never learned when it was safe to stand down. Over time, that constant stress changes the brain in very real ways. The amygdala, the part of the brain that scans for danger, becomes louder and more reactive. The hippocampus, which helps you store memories and understand time and context, starts to shrink under prolonged cortisol exposure. The prefrontal cortex, the part that helps you think clearly, regulate emotions, and make decisions, loses strength. These are not symbolic descriptions. Brain scans show these changes. That's why psychologists emphasize that what survivors experience isn't about weakness or personality flaws. It's about what happens to a human brain when it lives too long in emotional captivity. One of the first signs people notice is irritability that feels out of character. You snap over small things. Someone bumps into you and your body reacts as if you've been attacked. A loved one uses a tone that reminds you just slightly of the narcissist, and suddenly you're on edge. Inside, it feels like your fuse is gone. Psychologically, this makes perfect sense. Your amygdala has become hypersensitive, like a smoke alarm that was forced to detect danger too often. It no longer waits for a real fire. It reacts to the memory of smoke. With a narcissist, small things were never small. A harmless comment could spiral into hours of conflict. A misunderstood look could turn into punishment or withdrawal. Your nervous system learned that catching danger early was essential. So now, even in safe environments, your body reacts first and asks questions later. Healing isn't about forcing yourself to calm down. Psychologists focus on teaching the nervous system slowly patiently that the present is not the past. Grounding, breath work, and safe relational experiences help the brain relearn what safety actually feels like. Then there are the sudden waves of anger that seem to come out of nowhere. You're washing dishes, folding laundry, sitting quietly, and all at once, rage surges through you. Your jaw tightens, your hands clench, your chest burns. And just as quickly as it arrives, it fades, leaving you confused or ashamed. Trauma specialists explain that this anger has been there all along. You just weren't allowed to feel it. While living with a narcissist, anger was dangerous. Expressing it could lead to ridicule, escalation, or emotional punishment. So your body learned to suppress it, to swallow it for the sake of survival. But emotions don't disappear just because they're ignored. They get stored in the nervous system. For the narcissist, projecting anger onto you protected their fragile self-image. For you, it meant carrying both your pain and theirs. When safety finally returns, that stored anger looks for a way out. Healing means giving it a safe exit through movement, therapy, writing, or expression, so it doesn't have to erupt without warning. Memory issues can be one of the most frightening symptoms of all. Forgetting details, losing track of conversations, struggling to focus. It can make you feel like you're losing your mind. Psychologists tie this directly to the impact of stress hormones on the hippocampus. When your brain is busy keeping you safe, it doesn't prioritize memory formation. Survival comes first. This is also why gaslighting worked so well. When someone tells you that never happened and your memory already feels shaky, doubt creeps in easily. Healing clarity takes time. Reducing stress, building routine, and working with trauma-informed professionals help the brain relearn how to organize experience again. And then there's the exhaustion, the kind that sleep doesn't fix. You wake up tired. You sit still and feel drained. Your body feels heavy, foggy, worn down. Psychologically, this is what happens after years of running on emergency mode. Your nervous system was never allowed to rest. It was always watching, listening, bracing. When the danger finally eases, the body collapses into fatigue, finally acknowledging how hard it worked to keep you alive. This exhaustion isn't laziness. It's the aftermath of endurance. What matters most is this. None of these symptoms mean you are broken. They mean your brain did exactly what it had to do to survive an impossible situation. And now, slowly, imperfectly, it is learning how to live again. For the narcissist, this dynamic guaranteed a steady stream of attention, reassurance, and emotional labor. Your exhaustion was the fuel that kept the system running. For you, though, it meant living in a body that was never allowed to rest. Even when things were quiet on the surface, your nervous system was still working overtime, scanning for danger, anticipating shifts, preparing for impact. That's why recovery is not as simple as getting more sleep. Psychologists are clear that what needs healing is the nervous system itself. Safety has to be reintroduced slowly. Stimulation has to be reduced. The body has to learn, step by step, that it no longer needs to live in emergency mode before true restoration can begin. One of the most painful consequences of narcissistic abuse is the belief that something is inherently wrong with you. Over time, blame becomes internalized. When your emotions feel intense, when your memory falters, when you feel overwhelmed by things that seem easy for others, it's natural to assume the problem must be you. Clinically, psychologists recognize this belief as one of the deepest wounds left behind by narcissistic abuse. It keeps survivors trapped in shame, disconnected from self-compassion, and hesitant to trust their own experience. The narcissist benefits from this self-doubt. You pay the price for it. The reality is far gentler than the story you were taught. Your brain did exactly what it was designed to do. It adapted to an environment where safety came and went, where danger could appear without warning. Nothing about your response was flawed. Now, healing means teaching your nervous system a new truth that the threat has passed. With time, trauma-informed support, and consistent experiences of safety, the brain can reorganize. The fear center can quiet. Clear thinking can return. Memory can sharpen. Psychologists emphasize this again and again. Recovery is not rare or miraculous. It is the expected outcome when the danger truly ends. It's also important to understand something many survivors are never warned about. Healing does not feel calm at the beginning. Trauma specialists explain that when the nervous system finally steps out of prolonged threat, it doesn't settle peacefully right away. It shakes, it releases, it recalibrates, emotions surge, fatigue deepens, old sensations resurface. This is not you getting worse. It's your system decompressing after years of holding itself together. For the narcissist, this shift is destabilizing. A regulated nervous system can't be controlled or confused in the same way. For you, it's the first return to internal authority, even if it feels unfamiliar and unsteady at first. Grief often follows, and it can take people by surprise. Not just grief for the relationship, but grief for the person you were before the abuse. You may mourn your old clarity, your ease in the world, your confidence, even your hopefulness. Psychologists describe this as identity grief, a natural part of integrating loss while rebuilding the self. This grief can come in waves, sometimes disguised as emptiness or numbness. The narcissist thrives when you are disconnected from who you are. Your grief is evidence that you are reconnecting. The work here is not to rush past it, but to acknowledge it. Therapists often encourage survivors to name what was lost, not to stay stuck there, but to honor it without abandoning themselves. As your thinking becomes clearer, another unsettling shift may occur. You begin replaying past interactions and suddenly see them differently. Things that once felt confusing now feel obvious. Moments you brushed aside now register as violations. This can trigger delayed anger or even shock. Clinicians call this cognitive reprocessing, the brain revisiting old memories with new clarity once fear loosens its grip. For the narcissist, this clarity is threatening because it dismantles the story they relied on. For you, it can be both freeing and painful. Psychologists recommend pacing this process, allowing insight to emerge gradually and with support rather than flooding yourself with everything at once. You may also notice that your tolerance for certain behaviors disappears. What you once excused now feels unacceptable. This is what psychologists refer to as boundary awakening. During abuse, boundaries collapse because the nervous system prioritizes attachment over safety. As healing progresses, that internal alarm system recalibrates. The narcissist experiences this as rejection or hostility because they were accustomed to unlimited access. You may experience it as guilt or fear of being too much. The truth is simpler. Boundaries aren't punishments. They're protection. Trauma-informed therapists often guide survivors to practice small, consistent boundaries, so the brain learns that safety no longer requires self-erasure. Sleep can also change during this phase. Some people experience vivid dreams, nightmares, or restless nights. Neurologically, this reflects the brain finally processing material that was too dangerous to touch before. Psychologists view this not as a setback, but as integration. The narcissist benefited from your exhaustion and confusion. Restorative sleep slowly returns power to your thinking and emotional balance. Gentle routines before bed, predictability, reduced stimulation, grounding practices help signal safety to the nervous system and support this repair. Learning to trust yourself again may be one of the most emotionally complex parts of recovery. Years of gaslighting teach the brain to doubt its own perceptions. As self-trust begins to return, it's often followed immediately by fear. Trauma psychologists explain this push-pull as conditioning, Trusting yourself once led to punishment. Now, each moment of self-trust feels risky. The strategy isn't forcing confidence, but allowing it to build through repetition, noticing when your instincts are accurate, affirming them quietly, and letting trust grow at its own pace. Anger may also surface more clearly as your awareness deepens. This anger is often misunderstood, but clinically, it serves a vital function. Anger is a boundary emotion. It signals violation and mobilizes protection. The narcissist relied on your inability to access it. For you, anger is not bitterness, it's recognition. When expressed safely, through movement, writing, or therapy, it resolves rather than hardens. And over time, something subtle but powerful begins to take shape. Your body starts responding to the present instead of the past. You rest without bracing. You laugh without scanning for threat. You make decisions without rehearsing every possible consequence. Psychologists call this post-traumatic integration, not erasing what happened, but no longer living inside it. The narcissist fades here because their power was never intrinsic. It was borrowed from your fear. As fear loosens, their influence dissolves. So if you find yourself in this strange, layered place, tired and clearer, angry and softer, grieving and stronger at the same time, know this: nothing about what you're experiencing is random. It follows a pattern. It reflects a nervous system doing exactly what it is meant to do after prolonged threat. You adapted in extraordinary ways to survive. Now, you are learning how to live, and that is not weakness. That is resilience, finally allowed to finish its work.